perpetually condones the killing of people without consequence doesn't need to be revised. It needs to be dismantled. In the image, you can see he compares a police badge to a runaway slave patrol badge. Max, what's your reaction?
Well, first of all, I mean, listen, I think that you're an African-American in this country. Certainly, you're sensitive to anything resembling police brutality. I tend to call it brutality on the part of some police officers as opposed to police brutality because I don't like painting anybody with a broad brush any more than I like the black community being tainted with a broad brush for the actions of a few. However, this is a very, very serious issue. There is no question that Colin Kaepernick is justified with his anger and disgust, considering the fact that Philando Castile, the police officer, got away with a not guilty verdict, considering the fact that he shot this guy in the car when the guy wasn't a threat. How this police officer got off is just beyond comprehension as far as I'm concerned. And one of the other things that we have to point out is that on too many occasions, we've seen violence exercised by a bevy of individuals in this country. Unfortunately, when there's anything suspect that goes on, when it happens to be a black man, they end up dead, while others end up being simply arrested. And that's the issue that the black community is trying to bring to the forefront, as well as we should, because it's absolutely justified for us to be totally disgusted with the discrepancies that have taken place in terms of our justice system and how things have been exercised, because we're seeing black men dying, but we're not seeing that from other folks who commit acts of violence. They tend to get arrested. And I think everybody understands where I'm coming from in that regard. Having said all of that, Colin Kaepernick, I think that he's got to chill a little bit in this way. He wants a job in the National Football League. He wants to still play in the National Football League. There's no question that he should still be in the National Football League. So in our eyes, there's no question as to why he is not as of this moment in time. And since he wants to be gainfully employed, certainly nothing worth accomplishing of significance anyway doesn't come without sacrifice, and we all understand that. But right now, he's whistling into the wind because the things that he's bringing attention to and the things that he is saying is something that the black community obviously feels as a collective unit. We all recognize what's been transpiring. We're all highly sensitive to it. And you have an abundance of people that are taking the bull by the horn and willing to speak up and speak out about it. My dear friend Karen Hunter, who has her own radio show on Urban Views Channel 126 on Sirius XM, you can go to her website for the Karen Hunter Show and literally see a laundry list of African Americans who have been gunned down, who have been murdered, who have been assaulted by law enforcement officials. She has all of that stuff on there, and a bevy of other individuals have stuff like that as well. It is a problem. It is something that needs to be addressed. But I think Colin Kaepernick, one could argue, he has done his part already. He'd make even more noise if he got himself back into the National Football League, because right now he would be the embodiment of someone addressing this issue without having to say much. Now he's got to say much, rather. Now he's got to start playing chess instead of playing checkers. Plain and simple.
I understand Colin Kaepernick's frustration. Especially in the Castile case, all the public evidence seems to suggest that there needed to be consequences for the perpetrator, and once again, there are no consequences. So there's rightfully a lot of anger about it, and he's expressing some of it. I don't know about his revolutionary position. You know, the state is defined, famously, in political science, as the body with the monopoly on the legitimate use of force. In other words, there will always be police. There will always be the enforcement of law, and there will always be good and bad police. As Stephen A. said, when you paint them with a broad brush, the people who are most emotionally affected by these kind of incidents, in my experience, other than obviously the victims themselves, and you can include in that people of color who feel victimized now because they feel as though this can happen to them or their children or loved ones for no good reason. A routine traffic stop and their loved one is dead. But the other group that is affected are police, good police. Police work is a thankless job. It doesn't pay very well. It's extremely risky. It comes with personal sacrifice. Yes, police are empowered. But the good police know that requires that's a lot of responsibility. It involves enormous restraint. And the police who do their job well put themselves at further risk because of the amount of restraint they have to use. So if you talk to good cops, when something like this happens, they're like, they're the ones affected because they take all those sacrifices, show all that restraint, do their work well, only to have the entire, all police painted, as Stephen A. said, with the same brush because of some bad apples. Now, we could argue that there are too many bad apples, partly because of the reverberations of the institution of slavery, essentially, and institutionalized racism, and that I agree with. But Kaepernick's kind of broad brush painting maybe is an expression of understandable anger, but maybe needs to be refined a little bit. I don't know that Kaepernick is the best spokesman for this issue, but the point is he's one of the few who's willing to sacrifice, at personal sacrifice, even in terms of his professional career and millions of dollars, in order to speak up on this issue. And that is an important thing. So I broadly am sympathetic to his tweet, Stephen A.
I'm sympathetic as well, and I'm certainly not trying to cast aspersions on Colin Kaepernick. We all know how I feel about his position on not voting. That's when I just sat up there and, I just turned against him in terms of his hypocrisy. But that's the only reason. In terms of anything else, I'm not going to sit there and castigate him in any way. As a matter of fact, what I'm trying to do is say to Colin Kaepernick right now, you have done your part. You have spoken up enough. Now you need to be about the business of getting back into the NFL, recognizing the fact that the rest of us have heard you, and more importantly, the onus and the obligation should be on the rest of us to speak up and to speak out, because we all play a role. It would be a negligence of duty on my part, having this platform, if I didn't speak up. The same with a Karen Hunter, the same with a Joe Madison, the same with other NFL and NBA analysts and being commentators and pundits and what have you. We recognize that this is a problem. Colin Kaepernick needs to recognize that what he wanted to do in terms of bringing attention to and ultimately provoking change, to some degree, that is in the process of transpiring, at least we hope. It's not on him to do this anymore. He's done this part. And so we need to help him out by making sure we take the bull by the horn so he can get back to playing football and not being blackballed. And by the way, for the NFL, we need Roger Goodell or anybody else to deny that he's blackballed, that he's not being blackballed, or that he's being blackballed. They've got their head in the sand, or they're just being conscientiously ignorant, because the bottom line is, it is no question that Colin Kaepernick's stance has hurt him and has hurt his career tremendously.
For sure. So you have to appreciate, at least for him, that not stopping him,
right,
that it's affected his job. And Max, to your point, again, with his initial protest, we appreciate the message, but the way he went about it is a little bit concerning, again, even with this tweet. But guys, we